At first, they thought it was just another rescued puppy, a little dirty, a little strange, but harmless. Their golden retriever carried it home from the edge of the forest and laid it gently beside her own newborn pups, as if she knew it belonged there. For weeks, everything seemed normal, too normal. Then, in the 8th week, on a quiet evening when the yard was still and the air carried sound farther than it should, the puppy threw back its head and laughed. Not a bark, not a howl, a laugh that froze every living thing in place. That was the moment they realized the truth they had been trying not to see, and the moment they understood that loving this creature might cost them everything. Jack Miller liked quiet mornings. At 74, after decades of racing toward emergencies instead of away from them, he had earned the right to slow days and predictable routines. He liked the way the sun crept over the pines outside Flagstaff, Arizona, painting the edge of the forest gold. He liked the smell of coffee drifting through the open kitchen window. Most of all, he liked watching Sunny. Sunny was their golden retriever, 5 years old, calm and deeply affectionate, the kind of dog who seemed to understand people better than people understood each other. She lay on the porch with her 2 puppies, Buddy and Luna, still clumsy and soft with that round-bellied innocence only very young animals have. Evelyn, Jack's wife of 46 years, watched them from a rocking chair, smiling the way she always did when something living was nearby. They had not planned on another chapter in their lives. Retirement was supposed to be simple, but Evelyn had spent years volunteering at animal shelters, and Jack had spent a lifetime helping people on their worst days. Between them, compassion had become second nature. That morning began like any other, until Sunny lifted her head, her ears pricked forward, body suddenly alert, gaze fixed toward the tree line. Jack noticed the change immediately. Sunny rarely startled. She rose from the porch, tail low but steady, and without a sound trotted off toward the edge of the property, disappearing into the brush. "Probably a rabbit," Evelyn said lightly, though she stood as well, shading her eyes. Minutes passed. Then Sunny came back. She moved slower now, carefully, her head lowered. Something dark dangled from her mouth. At first, Jack thought it was a piece of burnt wood. There had been a small brush fire 2 nights before, sparked by lightning in the dry hills, and ash still clung to the air. But as Sunny stepped fully into the sunlight, Jack's breath caught. It was not wood. It was alive. Sunny laid her burden gently at the edge of the porch. The small creature was no bigger than a loaf of bread, its body trembling, fur matted with soot and dirt. It made a thin, strained sound, not quite a whine, not quite a cry. Evelyn gasped and rushed forward, dropping to her knees. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. Jack knelt beside her. Years of emergency work had trained his eyes to take in details fast. The animal was young, very young. Its eyes were barely open, clouded and unfocused. Its breathing was shallow. One tiny ear twitched, rounded in a way that struck Jack as odd, though he couldn't have said why. "What on earth did you find?" Evelyn murmured, reaching out. Sunny watched closely, her body tense but trusting. When Evelyn lifted the little creature, Sunny followed, nosing at it anxiously, then licking its face with careful strokes. The animal stilled slightly at the warmth. "It's a puppy," Evelyn said, certainty blooming in her voice. "Has to be." Jack didn't answer right away. He had seen a lot of dogs in his life. Strays, injured pets, animals pulled from wrecks and fires. This one felt different. The head was broader than he expected. The paws, even at this age, looked thick and strong. "Maybe some kind of mix," he said finally. Poor thing probably got separated in the fire. They brought the animal inside, wrapped it in a towel, and set up a small box near the heater. Evelyn fetched formula left over from helping a neighbor's orphaned kittens months earlier. The little creature latched on hungrily, drinking with surprising force. Evelyn smiled through tears. "You're a fighter." Sunny paced, clearly unhappy with the arrangement. When Evelyn placed the animal back into the box, Sunny whined softly, then did something Jack would remember for the rest of his life. She gently picked the creature up by the scruff and carried it straight into the room where Buddy and Luna slept. She laid it between her puppies and curled her body around all three. Jack and Evelyn looked at each other. "Well," Evelyn said quietly, "I guess that's settled." They named her Pepper that afternoon. It was Evelyn's idea. "She's got a little bite to her already," she said, watching the tiny animal shove her way closer to Sunny. "And she's spotted under all that dirt. Pepper suits her." Pepper slept almost constantly those first days, pressed between Buddy and Luna, rising and falling with Sunny's steady breathing. She nursed eagerly, sometimes with a determination that made Evelyn laugh. Buddy would squeak in protest as Pepper pushed past him, and Luna would simply scoot aside, patient as ever. Jack watched it all with a mixture of warmth and unease he couldn't quite explain. He told himself he was overthinking. He'd done that his whole career, seeing danger before it arrived. This was just a strange little puppy rescued at the right moment. If you're still with us, you're part of a remarkable community here at Whispering Hearts, where real stories of extraordinary animal connections come to life. Every subscriber helps us share more heart-touching moments that reveal the power of compassion across species. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because the journey ahead is one you'll feel long after the story ends. By the end of the first week, Pepper was stronger. She cried louder when she was hungry. She crawled sooner than Buddy or Luna had. Her eyes, now fully open, were dark and alert, tracking movement in a way Jack found unsettlingly focused. "She's smart," Evelyn said proudly. "Smarter than the others." Jack nodded, though a small knot tightened in his chest. That night, as the house settled into sleep, Jack stood in the doorway watching Sunny and her 3 charges. Pepper lay sprawled across her siblings, completely unbothered by their small protests. Sunny rested her chin protectively over all of them. Jack felt a strange pull in his chest, equal parts gratitude and something closer to fear. Whatever Pepper was, she had been brought here for a reason. Sunny had chosen her, Evelyn had claimed her, and Jack, despite his questions, felt the familiar old instinct rise up inside him. Protect, care, save. He did not yet know that some rescues ask more than love. He did not yet know that in 8 weeks' time a sound would echo through their quiet yard that would change the meaning of that first day forever. By the time Pepper was 2 weeks old, the rhythm of the Miller household had changed. Jack noticed it first in the mornings. When he stepped onto the porch with his coffee, Buddy and Luna would wobble toward Sunny, tails thumping, their movements soft and uncertain. Pepper, however, pushed herself upright with surprising ease. She did not wobble so much as plant her feet, thick little paws splayed wide as if the ground itself were something she intended to master early. "She's just eager," Evelyn said when Jack mentioned it. "Some puppies are." Jack nodded, but he watched more closely after that. Pepper nursed differently. Buddy and Luna latched, drank, dozed. Pepper latched with intensity, her small body pressing forward, shoulders working as if she were pulling nourishment from the world rather than simply receiving it. More than once, Buddy squeaked in protest as Pepper shoved past him. Sunny corrected her gently, nudging Pepper back into place, but Pepper returned again and again, undeterred. "She's determined," Evelyn laughed. "I kind of admire it." Jack didn't laugh. He had spent too many years watching small signs turn into big problems. Still, he told himself this was harmless. Sunny was calm. The puppies were safe. That had to count for something. By the 3rd week, Pepper had nearly caught up to Buddy and Luna in size. That alone might not have meant much, but it was the way she carried herself that unsettled Jack. Her head seemed broader, her neck thicker. When she lifted her face, her gaze held steady instead of darting away. Jack found himself oddly aware of her eyes whenever he entered the room. Pepper watched him, not with fear, not even with curiosity in the way puppies usually showed it. She watched as if she were taking notes. Evelyn adored her. She carried Pepper around the house, tucked against her chest, talking to her the way she had once talked to nervous shelter dogs. Pepper responded with soft, strange little sounds. Not quite yips, not quite whines. Evelyn thought they were adorable. "She's talking," she said proudly. "She just has her own voice." At night, the puppies slept in a tight knot. Pepper always ended up in the center, sprawled across Buddy and Luna as if she belonged there by right. Buddy accepted this with mild annoyance. Luna accepted it with quiet patience. Sunny accepted it completely. Jack lay awake more than once, listening to the house breathe, his thoughts circling. He tried to identify what troubled him, but every concern felt flimsy when weighed against the simple fact that Pepper was alive because Sunny had brought her home. That mattered. By the 4th week, Pepper began exploring beyond the basket. Buddy and Luna toddled cautiously, stopping often, sitting when they were unsure. Pepper moved with purpose. Her gait was slightly different, lower in front, her back legs pushing her forward in short, powerful bursts. She bumped into furniture, learned its shape, and tried again. One afternoon, Evelyn gave the puppies a knotted rope toy meant for teething. Buddy gnawed at one end, Luna at the other, their tails wagging in contentment. Pepper watched them for a moment, head tilted. Then she lunged. She grabbed the middle of the rope and shook her head hard. Buddy and Luna lost their grip immediately, tumbling backward in surprise. Pepper held the rope, jaws clenched, and shook again. Fibers snapped, the toy tore. Evelyn gasped. Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "That's impressive," Evelyn said, trying to smile. Jack didn't answer. He took the rope away gently, feeling its frayed ends between his fingers. It had been thick, durable, designed for dogs much larger than this. Pepper sat back on her haunches, looking pleased with herself. "She's strong," Evelyn said softly, as if speaking louder might offend the puppy. Jack nodded. Strong. That was one word for it. The changes became harder to ignore as the weeks passed. Pepper's appetite grew ravenous. She chewed with a force that left dents in rubber toys. Once, Jack found her gnawing on the corner of a plastic storage bin, deep grooves carved into the surface. "That's not normal," he muttered. Evelyn heard him. "Jack," she said gently, "she survived a fire. Maybe she's just different." Different. The words settled between them. Jack wanted to believe that was all it was. Then came the incident with the yard. A breeze carried the smell of pine and ash, and a stray chicken from a neighboring property wandered close to the fence. Buddy and Luna noticed it and barked in playful excitement, hopping clumsily in its direction. Pepper froze. Her body lowered, her head dipped, her eyes locked onto the chicken with a focus so sharp Jack felt it like a physical thing. She took a step, forward. Then another. Each movement was quiet, measured. "Pepper," Evelyn called, her voice light, uncertain. Sunny reacted before Jack could move. A sharp bark cut through the air. Pepper stopped instantly, snapping her attention to Sunny, confusion flickering across her face. The moment passed, but it left something behind. That evening, Evelyn sat quietly while Jack locked the gate. "She's still a baby," Evelyn said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Jack replied, "but babies grow." The bath incident happened the following week. Buddy and Luna splashed happily in the shallow basin, water sloshing everywhere. Pepper went in last. The moment her paws touched the water, she panicked. She scrambled violently, claws scraping, eyes wide with a terror Jack recognized all too well. She launched herself out of the tub, skidding across the floor, crashing into a laundry basket before bolting for the door. It took both Jack and Sonny to coax her back. Evelyn wrapped Pepper in a towel, shaking. "I've never seen a puppy react like that," she whispered. Neither had Jack. That night, as Pepper slept restlessly, Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. He had seen fear in people. Real fear. Instinctive fear. What he had seen in Pepper was something older than learning. He looked down the hall toward the soft rise and fall of 3 small bodies pressed together, Sonny's steady presence anchoring them. Whatever question stirred in his mind, one truth stood firm. Pepper was theirs now. And yet, a quiet voice inside him whispered that loving her might not be enough to keep them safe. From her, or from what she was becoming. He pushed the thought away. There would be time, he told himself. He did not yet know how quickly that time was running out. By the time Pepper reached her 5th week, the house no longer felt as small and quiet as it once had. It wasn't that Pepper was loud. In fact, she was often silent, watching, listening. It was the sense of weight she carried with her now, physical and otherwise. When she moved across the living room, the floorboards seemed to notice. Buddy and Luna still tumbled and squeaked like puppies should, but Pepper's play had changed. She didn't bounce. She charged. Jack tried to laugh it off the first time he saw her tear apart a new chew toy. It was a thick rubber bone, the kind advertised as indestructible. Pepper clamped down on one end, braced her front legs, and twisted her head. The sound that followed was sharp and final. The bone split cleanly in 2. "Well," Jack said, forcing a smile, "guess that's false advertising." Evelyn laughed with him, but the sound didn't quite reach her eyes. They started putting Pepper's toys away when she wasn't supervised. Not because she was destructive, Evelyn insisted, but because she was too enthusiastic. Jack nodded and went along with it. He told himself that management was better than worry. Then Megan noticed. Megan lived 3 houses down, a woman in her early 30s with an easy smile and a phone always in her hand. She worked from home, spent a lot of time online, and had a habit of documenting everything from her morning coffee to her evening walks. She loved Sonny. She adored Buddy and Luna. When she heard the Millers had taken in a rescue puppy, she came by with a gift basket and her camera already rolling. "Oh my gosh," Megan said, crouching down. "She's adorable. What kind is she?" Evelyn hesitated. "We're not sure. Some kind of mix." Pepper stepped forward, sniffed Megan's shoe, then looked up. Her mouth opened in what might have been a smile, her lips pulling back just enough to show small, sharp teeth. Megan laughed nervously and reached out, then thought better of it. "She's intense," Megan said lightly. "She's been through a lot," Evelyn replied. Megan filmed Sonny with the puppies instead. Later that evening, Jack saw the video posted in the neighborhood group. Sonny nursing 3 pups. The caption read, "Golden Hearts. Rescue Mama takes in an extra baby after the fire." The comments were kind at first, then curious, then uneasy. "That middle one looks big. Those teeth, though. Are you sure that's a dog?" Jack closed his laptop without responding. A few days later, Megan returned, this time unannounced. Pepper was in the yard with Buddy and Luna, wrestling over a rope toy Jack hadn't realized Evelyn had put back out. "Mind if I grab a quick clip?" Megan asked. People loved the last one. Before Jack could answer, Pepper lunged for the rope. Buddy and Luna yelped as it was ripped from their mouths. Pepper shook it hard. The rope didn't just fray, it shredded, fibers snapping and flying through the air like confetti. Megan's laughter died in her throat. "Wow," she said. "That's... wow." Jack stepped forward. "That's enough, Pepper." Pepper released the rope immediately, sitting back with an expectant look, tail thumping. She had done exactly what she'd been told. Megan lowered her phone slowly. "How old did you say she was?" "About 5 weeks, Evelyn said. Megan blinked. "She's strong for that age." "Yes," Jack said shortly. "She is." That clip never made it online, but the attention had already been drawn. From then on, Jack felt it constantly. Eyes on the yard, glances held a little too long, conversations that stopped when he walked by. It wasn't hostility, not yet, but it was awareness, and awareness could turn into something else very quickly. Inside the house, the differences between the puppies grew sharper. Buddy learned his name and came running when called. Luna followed Evelyn everywhere, content just to be near. Pepper learned patterns. She learned when Jack locked the door. She learned where Evelyn kept the treats. She learned how to open the lower cabinet with a firm nudge of her head. "She's clever," Evelyn said, half impressed, half uneasy. "She's calculating," Jack replied before he could stop himself. The words hung between them. Later that week, Jack found Pepper gnawing on the edge of a plastic storage crate. The damage was severe. Deep grooves marred the surface, plastic curled and warped from pressure. "That's enough," Jack said firmly, pulling her away. Pepper whined softly, confused, then pressed her head against his leg, seeking reassurance. Jack froze, caught between alarm and affection. He rested a hand on her back, feeling the solid muscle beneath her fur. "You're still just a baby," he whispered. "Right?" That night, Evelyn sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. "Jack," she said slowly. "Someone commented on Megan's video, the first one." He looked up. "What did they say?" She hesitated. "They asked if we'd reported the rescue. Said wildlife sometimes comes out of fires and ends up in the wrong place." Jack felt a chill run through him. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said. "We saved a life." "I know," Evelyn said. "But what if—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "No, I don't want to think that way." Neither did Jack, but he thought of Pepper's jaws, her eyes, the way she had stalked the chicken without a sound. That evening, Pepper lay in the yard, chewing contentedly on a thick branch she'd dragged over from the tree line. Buddy and Luna slept in the grass nearby. Sonny watched them all, calm and steady. Jack stood at the window, a familiar weight settling in his chest. He had faced danger before. He knew what it felt like when a situation was drifting beyond control. Pepper looked up, met his gaze, and made a soft, unfamiliar sound, a low, breathy noise that wasn't quite a growl, wasn't quite a whine. Jack didn't know why, but it sent a shiver down his spine. Something was watching them now, from the outside. And something else was growing inside their home, stronger, faster, and less familiar with each passing day. He had the unsettling sense that whatever came next would not be theirs to manage quietly. By the beginning of the 6th week, Evelyn stopped using the word phase. She didn't say it out loud, not to Jack and certainly not to herself, but the easy explanations she once reached for no longer fit. Pepper wasn't just growing. She was changing, and the changes didn't feel random. They felt purposeful, as if something ancient inside her was waking up piece by piece. It started early one morning while the air was still cool and the yard quiet. Jack was fixing a loose board on the fence when he noticed Pepper standing near the chicken enclosure at the edge of the property. Buddy and Luna were nearby, rolling in the grass, chasing each other in clumsy circles. Sonny lay in the shade, half asleep, her ears flicking at familiar sounds. Pepper wasn't playing. Her body was low, shoulders dipped forward, back legs coiled beneath her. She moved one step at a time, deliberate and silent, eyes locked on a single hen scratching in the dirt beyond the wire. The chicken lifted its head, uneasy. Jack's stomach tightened. "Pepper," he called softly. She didn't react. He took a step closer, heart pounding now. He had seen that posture before, on documentaries and slow-motion footage of predators closing in. It did not belong in his backyard. Sonny reacted before Jack could raise his voice. A sharp, commanding bark cut through the stillness. Pepper froze instantly, head snapping around toward Sonny. For a moment she looked genuinely confused, as if torn between two realities she didn't yet understand. Then she backed away, ears flattening, tail dropping low. Jack exhaled slowly. His hands were shaking. Evelyn had seen it too. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "That wasn't play," she said quietly. "No," Jack replied. "It wasn't." They didn't talk about it after that. They didn't need to. The image lingered between them like smoke that refused to clear. Later that week came the incident with the water. Bath day had always been a small joy. Buddy and Luna splashed and pawed at the surface, snapping playfully at bubbles, their tails wagging so hard their entire bodies wiggled. Evelyn laughed as she dried them off, kissing their damp heads. Pepper went last. The moment her paws touched the water, something in her snapped. She screamed, not a puppy yelp, but a raw, panicked sound that sent a jolt through Jack's chest. She scrambled wildly, claws scraping against the basin, water sloshing over the sides. Before anyone could grab her, she vaulted out, skidding across the tile and crashing into the laundry basket. She bolted down the hall, slipping and sliding, leaving a trail of wet paw prints behind her. Jack found her under the porch, pressed against the foundation, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Her eyes were wide, white showing all around, breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. "It's okay," Jack murmured, crouching low. "You're safe." It took Sonny's presence, her calm body blocking the open space, for Pepper to allow herself to be touched. Even then, she flinched when Jack lifted her, muscles rigid as wire. Evelyn wrapped her in a towel, tears running silently down her cheeks. "I've never seen fear like that in a puppy," she whispered. Jack didn't answer. He had, many times, and it had never been learned. From that day on, the house felt different. Pepper became restless. She dug at the yard with a focus that bordered on obsession, flinging dirt aside with powerful strokes of her front legs until she had created deep hollows in the ground. She would lie in them afterward, chest heaving, eyes bright with satisfaction. Buddy and Luna played around her, careful now, as if they sensed something they couldn't name. When Pepper joined them, her play was too rough, too intense. Jack intervened more often, his voice sharper than he liked. Sonny corrected Pepper when she crossed a line, a firm bark stopping her in her tracks. Pepper listened, always listened, but the moments before those corrections grew more frequent. One afternoon, Jack noticed Pepper standing at the fence again, watching the woods beyond. Her head tilted, nostrils flaring as if she were tasting the air. When a rustle came from the trees, her body tensed instantly. Jack felt a cold weight settle in his chest. That evening, Evelyn found Jack sitting at the kitchen table long after dinner, staring at nothing. "You're thinking again," she said gently. "I can't stop," he admitted. "Every sign points in the same direction." She sat across from him, reaching for his hand. "What direction?" He hesitated. Saying it felt dangerous, like naming something that might become real just by being spoken. "She's not just different," he said finally. "She's wired differently." Evelyn swallowed hard. "She's still a baby." "Yes," Jack said, "but babies grow into what they're meant to be." The next day, Megan stopped by again, leaning over the fence with her phone in hand. "I heard something last night," she said casually. "A weird noise, almost like laughing." Jack's blood ran cold. "That wasn't us," Evelyn said quickly. Megan shrugged. "Probably coyotes. Still, your rescue pup is something else. People are asking questions." After she left, Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, her face pale. "They're noticing," she said. "We can't pretend they won't." Jack nodded. He had known this was coming. He had just hoped they would have more time. That night, as the sun dipped below the trees, the family gathered in the yard. Buddy and Luna chased a ball, tumbling over each other in delight. Sunny watched, content but alert. Pepper joined the game, her movements fast and powerful. She knocked Buddy aside without meaning to, sending him sprawling. He yelped, more surprised than hurt. Sunny barked sharply. Pepper stopped, ears flat, eyes wide. Jack's heart pounded. He knelt beside Pepper, holding her gently, feeling the strength coiled beneath her skin. "You don't know your own strength," he whispered. Pepper looked up at him, her mouth parting slightly, breath puffing out in a strange, unfamiliar sound. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a whine. Jack froze. The sound was brief, almost playful, but it echoed in his mind long after Pepper settled back down. That night, Jack lay awake listening to the forest beyond their walls. He thought of fires driving creatures from their homes, of instincts honed over thousands of years, of love offered freely without understanding the cost. He had the sinking realization that whatever Pepper truly was, it was beginning to surface, and that soon they would no longer be able to protect her from the world or the world from her. The 8th week arrived quietly. If Jack hadn't been counting days in his head, marking Pepper's growth the way he once tracked vital signs on an ambulance clipboard, he might not have noticed the shift at first. On the surface, life went on as usual. Buddy and Luna were nearly weaned, playful and trusting. Sunny still moved through the house with calm authority, correcting when needed, nurturing without hesitation. Pepper followed her everywhere, devotion written into every step. But something about Pepper felt heavier now. Not just in size, though she had grown remarkably fast, but in presence. She filled a space when she entered it. Jack found himself adjusting his movements without realizing it, giving her room the way one instinctively does around something powerful. That evening, the air was unusually still, the kind of stillness that made sounds travel farther than they should. The Millers gathered in the backyard as they often did near sunset, the light slanting low through the pines, painting everything in soft gold. Jack tossed a ball across the grass. Buddy raced after it, ears flapping wildly, Luna close behind. Their joyful yips cut through the quiet. Pepper watched them for a moment, head tilted, eyes bright. Then she moved. She crossed the yard in 2 quick bounds and shoulder-checked Buddy with playful force, sending him tumbling harmlessly into the grass. She scooped up the ball and stood there, chest puffed slightly, tail swinging in broad, confident arcs. Evelyn laughed despite herself. She thinks she won. Pepper tossed the ball into the air and caught it again, excitement radiating from her entire body. She shook her head once, then twice, as if the feeling inside her had nowhere to go, and then she threw her head back. The sound that came out of her was wrong. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl or a howl. It was a series of breathy, high-pitched whoops, broken by strange, almost bubbling giggles. The noise rose and fell in quick bursts, echoing across the yard and into the trees beyond. It sounded like laughter. Everything stopped. Buddy froze mid-step, ball forgotten. Luna lowered herself instinctively, ears pinned back. Sunny stiffened, her ears flattening against her head, eyes locked on Pepper with an expression Jack had never seen before, something sharp and alert, almost like recognition. Evelyn's hand flew to Jack's arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "What was that?" she whispered. Jack didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth had gone dry. The sound faded as suddenly as it had begun. Pepper dropped the ball and looked around, tail wagging, clearly pleased, clearly confused by the sudden silence. She trotted over to Jack and nudged his knee with her nose, inviting him to throw the ball again. Jack stared down at her, heart pounding so loudly he was sure she could hear it. Dogs did not make that sound. Not ever. Sunny approached Pepper slowly, sniffing her face and neck, her movements careful. Pepper leaned into her, making soft, contented noises as if nothing unusual had happened. But something had broken. That night, the house felt too quiet. Buddy and Luna fell asleep quickly, exhausted from play. Pepper lay between them, breathing evenly. Sunny curled around all three, her body forming a protective wall. Jack sat alone at the kitchen table long after Evelyn had gone to bed. The glow of the laptop screen felt harsh in the dark room. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. He typed anyway. Puppy laughing sound. Strong jaw force young animal. Rounded ears, spotted coat. The results appeared almost immediately. Jack's breath caught as images filled the screen. His stomach tightened, then dropped. He clicked link after link, his heart racing, his mind rejecting what his eyes insisted on showing him. The similarities were undeniable. The laugh, the jaw, the posture, the growth rate. Jack slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing through the house. He pressed his palms flat against the table, breathing hard. He was not ready. He was not ready to say the word, not to himself, not to Evelyn. He told himself there had to be another explanation, some rare breed, some anomaly. He told himself that love and environment could shape anything, but deep down, beneath the denial, something cold and certain took root. He knew. The next morning, Evelyn noticed the change in him immediately. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "Did you?" She hesitated, then shook hers as well. They moved through the day carefully, speaking around the truth instead of toward it. Pepper followed Jack from room to room, her presence constant, comforting, and somehow unbearably heavy. In the afternoon, Megan's voice floated over the fence. "Hey, Jack, did you hear that noise last night? Sounded wild." Jack felt his chest tighten. "Probably coyotes," he replied evenly. Megan laughed. "That's what I thought too, but it sounded different." She lingered a moment longer than usual, eyes drifting toward Pepper, who stood beside Jack, calm and attentive. After Megan left, Jack closed the gate and stood there for a long time. That evening, as Pepper gnawed contentedly on a thick branch, Jack watched the muscles in her jaw work with efficient power. He thought of the images he'd seen, the facts he'd read, the reality he was no longer sure he could outrun. Evelyn came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "You're thinking again," she said. "Yes," Jack replied quietly. "And this time, I don't think I'm wrong." He looked down at Pepper. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze with those steady, intelligent eyes. For the first time since Sunny had carried her home from the edge of the forest, Jack felt fear outweigh hope. The sound of that laughter echoed in his mind, refusing to fade. Whatever Pepper truly was, it had announced itself at last. And Jack knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that nothing in their lives would ever be the same again. The days after the laughter felt fragile, as if the Miller household were made of glass. No one spoke about the sound out loud, but it lived with them now. It lingered in the quiet moments, in the way Jack watched Pepper from the corner of his eye, in the way Evelyn reached for her a little more often, as if touch alone could anchor something that was beginning to drift. Pepper, for her part, seemed lighter, almost joyful. She followed Sunny with renewed devotion, mimicked her movements, responded instantly to every correction. If anyone had been watching closely, they might have said she was trying to be good, trying to belong. But the outside world was no longer content to look away. It started with Megan. One afternoon, Evelyn's phone buzzed while she was folding laundry. A message from the neighborhood group popped up on her screen, followed by another, Then another. She wiped her hands on her jeans and opened the thread. Someone had posted a short video. Grainy, shot from a distance. The lighting was poor, the sound muffled, but unmistakable. Pepper's laughter. The caption read, "Anyone else hearing weird noises at night near the Miller's place? This doesn't sound like a dog." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Jack found her sitting at the kitchen table, phone clenched in her hand, eyes unfocused. "They posted it," she whispered. He didn't need to ask who. Jack watched the video once, then again. Each time his chest tightened further. Comments scrolled beneath it. "That's not normal. Could be wildlife. Game and Fish should know about this." Jack closed his eyes. "We don't have much time," he said quietly. Before Evelyn could respond, a sharp yelp cut through the house. Jack was on his feet instantly, heart hammering. He burst into the yard to find Buddy crying, tucked against the fence, Luna pacing anxiously nearby. Pepper stood frozen a few feet away, ears flattened, eyes wide with panic. Blood dotted the grass. Sunny was already there, her body positioned squarely between Pepper and Buddy, teeth bared in a low, unmistakable growl. It wasn't playful. It wasn't corrective. It was protective. "Sunny," Jack said firmly, moving forward. Pepper backed away immediately, crouching low, confusion and distress written across her face. She whined softly, taking hesitant steps toward Buddy, then stopping when Sunny growled again. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside Buddy, hands shaking as she examined the wound. It was small, a puncture more than a tear, but it bled freely. Buddy trembled, eyes wide with shock. "She didn't mean to," Evelyn said quickly, though her voice broke. "She was playing." "I know," Jack said, but knowing didn't change what had happened. That night, Pepper slept alone for the first time. Evelyn laid a blanket for her near the door to the bedroom. Pepper circled it restlessly, whining softly, looking from the closed bedroom door to Sunny, who lay on the other side with Buddy and Luna. Sunny did not move. Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He had avoided this moment for as long as he could. He had told himself that silence was protection, that delay was mercy. Now he knew better. The next morning, Jack made the call. Dr. Rachel Carter answered on the third ring. Her voice was calm, professional, edged with curiosity as Jack explained the situation. He chose his words carefully, describing Pepper's size, her behavior, the sound she made. There was a pause on the line. "I'll come out," Dr. Carter said finally. "Today." When she arrived that afternoon, Jack recognized the look immediately. He had worn it himself many times. Quiet focus, no wasted movement, eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Carter stood at the edge of the yard, watching Pepper from a distance. Pepper noticed her at once, head lifting, nostrils flaring as she took in a new scent. She trotted forward, tail wagging, confidence unshaken. Dr. Carter crouched slowly, letting Pepper approach on her own terms. Pepper sniffed her boots, then her hands, then pushed her head forward insistently, demanding attention. Dr. Carter's brows drew together. She examined Pepper carefully. The shape of her skull, the set of her ears, her teeth. When Pepper opened her mouth in what might have been a smile, Dr. Carter inhaled sharply. After several long minutes, she stood and turned to Jack and Evelyn. "You already know," she said gently. Evelyn shook her head, tears spilling over. "Say it anyway." Dr. Carter took a breath. "This is not a dog. She's a spotted hyena, a female. I'd estimate about 10 weeks old." The words landed with a dull, crushing finality. Evelyn covered her mouth, a broken sound escaping her. Jack felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet, even though he had been bracing for this exact moment. "But she's gentle," Evelyn whispered. "She loves us." She loves Sonny. I can see that, Dr. Carter said. And what you've done for her has likely saved her life. But love doesn't change biology, she explained calmly, thoroughly. The size Pepper would reach, the strength of her jaws, the instincts that would continue to surface no matter how she was raised. If authorities get involved, Dr. Carter continued, this could end very badly. For her, for you, for your dogs. Evelyn's sobs grew louder. Jack put an arm around her, though his own chest felt hollow. So what do we do? Jack asked. Dr. Carter met his eyes. We find her a place where she can be what she is. Safely. Pepper sat at Jack's feet, leaning against his leg, oblivious to the earthquake unfolding around her. Jack looked down at her, at the animal they had loved, without knowing what they were loving. And for the first time since Sonny had carried her home, Jack understood the terrible truth. The hardest part was still ahead. The house felt hollow after Dr. Carter left. Pepper followed her to the door, tail wagging, curious as always, unaware that the woman's visit had changed everything. When the car disappeared down the road, Pepper returned to the living room and settled at Jack's feet with a satisfied sigh, pressing her warm body against his leg. Jack did not move. Evelyn sat across from him on the couch, hands clenched together, eyes red and unfocused. The words Dr. Carter had spoken echoed endlessly in her mind, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. Spotted hyena. Not a dog. Cannot continue. She's still our Pepper, Evelyn said suddenly, her voice trembling. She still looks at us the same way. Jack nodded. I know. She hasn't changed, Evelyn continued, tears spilling over. We have. Jack swallowed hard. We've learned what she is. Evelyn stood and paced the room, her movements restless, almost frantic. People raise wild animals all the time. You hear about it. They make it work. And you hear how it ends, Jack replied quietly. She stopped pacing and turned on him. So that's it? We just give her away, after everything? Jack stood slowly, his knees stiff, his chest aching. We don't give her away, he said. We give her a chance. Evelyn shook her head, anger and grief tangled together. A chance to be locked behind a fence, to never sleep with Sonny again, to never know this house. Pepper lifted her head at the sound of her name and padded over, nudging Evelyn's hand insistently. Evelyn dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around Pepper's neck, burying her face in her fur. I can't, she sobbed. I can't do this. Jack knelt beside them, resting his hand on Pepper's broad back. He felt the strength there, the power coiled just beneath the surface. He remembered Buddy's cry, the blood on the grass, Sonny's growl. I don't want to either, he said softly. But wanting isn't enough. That evening, Jack called Dr. Carter back. She answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. There's a wildlife rehabilitation sanctuary outside Sedona, she said. They work with hyenas rescued from illegal captivity and habitat loss. They know what they're doing. Evelyn listened from across the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. They can take her tomorrow, Dr. Carter continued. I'll transport her myself. If you want, Sonny can come along for the ride. It might make it easier for Pepper. Jack closed his eyes. Thank you. When he hung up, the silence pressed down on them again. Tomorrow. The night stretched long and heavy. Jack broke their usual rule and brought all the dogs into the bedroom. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. Evelyn understood immediately, her face crumpling as she nodded. Sonny took her place at the foot of the bed. Buddy and Luna curled together in their basket. Pepper hesitated for just a moment, then climbed onto the bed between Jack and Evelyn, stretching out with a contented grunt, her head settling against Jack's chest. Evelyn stroked Pepper's fur, slowly, carefully, as if trying to memorize every texture, every pattern. Jack kept his hand on Pepper's back, feeling her breathe, feeling the warmth that had become so familiar. Pepper looked up at them, eyes bright and trusting. If she sensed the sadness, she didn't understand it. She responded the only way she knew how, by pressing closer, by offering comfort she didn't know she was giving. Jack stared at the ceiling, his vision blurring. Love, he realized, was not the gentle thing people like to imagine. It was fierce. It demanded sacrifices that felt unbearable. Morning came too quickly. Dr. Carter arrived just after sunrise. Pepper bounded toward her happily, tail wagging, ready for an adventure. Sonny followed close behind, watchful but calm. Evelyn packed Pepper's things with shaking hands, the shredded rope toy she adored, the scuffed rubber ball, the blanket that smelled like home. The drive was quiet. Pepper rode in the back with Sonny, occasionally nudging her foster mother, receiving steady reassurance in return. Jack and Evelyn followed in their car, neither of them speaking, both of them crying. The sanctuary was set among red rock and tall trees, its enclosures wide and natural, designed to feel as close to the wild as possible. The air carried unfamiliar sounds, calls, whoops, low vocalizations that made Pepper's ears twitch. She lifted her head, alert, curious. As they approached the enclosure for young hyenas, a chorus of sounds rose up. Pepper froze, her entire body going still. Her ears pricked forward, her nostrils flared. For the first time in her life, she heard others like herself. One of the younger hyenas approached the fence, studying Pepper intently. Pepper took a hesitant step forward, then another. A soft chitter escaped her throat. The other hyena answered in kind. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh," she whispered. "She knows." The moment to say goodbye came too soon. Evelyn knelt in the dirt and pulled Pepper close, holding her tightly. "You're going to be okay," she whispered through tears. "You're going to be who you're meant to be." Pepper licked her face enthusiastically, tasting salt, confused by the emotion but responding with affection. Jack knelt next, his hands trembling as he pressed the rope toy into Pepper's mouth. She took it proudly, tail wagging. Sonny approached last. She sniffed Pepper thoroughly, slowly, as if committing her scent to memory. Then she licked Pepper's face again and again, grooming her the way she always had. Pepper leaned into it, making soft sounds of contentment. When Sonny finally stepped back, she looked at Jack, eyes deep and expressive. Jack would always believe she understood. The gate opened. Pepper hesitated, glancing back once. Then the sounds from inside drew her forward. As she disappeared into the enclosure, Evelyn cried out softly, her knees giving way. Jack caught her, holding her as the gate closed with a final, echoing click. They stood there for a long time. They had not chosen what was easy. They had chosen what was right, and it had broken their hearts wide open. Time moved strangely after Pepper left. The days felt too long, the nights too quiet. Buddy and Luna grew quickly, their puppy clumsiness smoothing into the easy confidence of young dogs. Sonny returned to her routines, loyal and steady, but Jack noticed how she sometimes paused at the back door, ears lifting at distant sounds, as if listening for something that would never come home again. Evelyn coped by keeping busy. She cleaned, reorganized, donated old blankets to the shelter she still volunteered with. Some mornings she woke feeling almost normal. Other mornings she sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee, staring at the space where Pepper used to lie. Jack watched her closely, saying little. He knew grief well enough to understand that it didn't move in straight lines. Emails from the sanctuary began to arrive a few weeks later. Pepper was healthy. Pepper was eating well. Pepper was integrating faster than expected. One message included a photo. Pepper lying in a shallow pit of dirt, only her head visible, eyes bright and alert. Another showed her trotting alongside two other young hyenas, her posture confident, her body already broader and stronger than Jack remembered. Evelyn cried over every picture. But the tears were changing. 6 months passed. When Dr. Carter called to say Pepper was settled enough for visitors, Jack and Evelyn sat in silence for a long moment after hanging up. "Do you want to go?" Jack asked gently. Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining. "I need to see her." The drive to the sanctuary felt heavier than the one that had taken Pepper there. Then they had been numb with shock. Now they carried hope and fear. What if she didn't remember them? What if seeing her again hurt more than leaving her had? The sanctuary looked different in the cooler light of early autumn. The trees had shifted color, the air crisp and clean. A keeper led them to an observation area near the enclosure where Pepper lived with a small clan of other hyenas. "She's grown a lot," the keeper warned kindly. They weren't prepared for just how much. Pepper emerged from behind a stand of trees, powerful and sure, her spotted coat gleaming in the sunlight. She moved with a confidence that took Jack's breath away. This was not the awkward, oversized puppy they had raised. This was a young, wild animal, fully herself. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. "She's beautiful," she whispered. Jack nodded, unable to speak. They stood quietly, watching. Pepper wrestled with another hyena, the play rough but balanced, instinctive in a way that made sudden sense. She fit here. Every movement told the story of belonging. Jack felt something loosen in his chest. Then the wind shifted. Pepper stopped mid-step, her head lifting sharply. Her ears rotated forward, her nostrils flared as she drew in the air. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Pepper threw her head back and laughed. The sound was unmistakable, the same strange, bubbling whoop that had once frozen Jack's blood, but now surrounded by answering calls from the rest of the enclosure. It felt different. Right. Pepper turned and ran toward the fence. The keepers gasped softly. "She doesn't do that for visitors," one of them said. Pepper pressed herself against the barrier, eyes bright, tail swinging in wide arcs. She made soft, chittering sounds, pacing back and forth, never taking her eyes off them. "She remembers," Evelyn breathed. Jack stepped forward slowly, heart pounding. He reached through the fence just enough to rest his hand against the metal. Pepper pushed her head forward, pressing against his fingers with familiar insistence. Jack laughed then, a wet, broken sound. "Hi, girl." Evelyn joined him, her hands shaking as she reached out. Pepper leaned into the touch, eyes half closing, her body vibrating with excitement. For several precious minutes, the world narrowed to that fence, that connection, that impossible bridge between past and present. "She's happy," Evelyn said through tears, smiling at the same time. "Look at her, Jack. She's whole." Jack nodded, his throat tight. "We did the right thing." "Yes," Evelyn said. "We did." As they prepared to leave, Pepper lingered at the fence, watching them with steady focus. Then one of the other hyenas called from deeper inside the enclosure. Pepper turned, hesitated, and then trotted back toward her clan, joining them without fear or confusion. She belonged to two stories now. On the drive home, the car was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Lighter, peaceful. Back at the house, Sonny greeted them at the door, tail wagging. Jack knelt and hugged her, burying his face in her fur. "You did good," he murmured. "You did so good." That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Jack and Evelyn sat on the porch together. Buddy and Luna dozed at their feet. The forest hummed softly beyond the fence. Evelyn leaned her head on Jack's shoulder. "I thought letting her go would break us forever," she said. Jack kissed the top of her head. "It broke something," he agreed. "But it also fixed something else." They sat in silence for a while, listening. Somewhere far off, carried faintly on the wind, a sound drifted through the trees. A wild, distant call, answered by another and another. Evelyn smiled softly. Love, they had learned, was not about holding on until nothing was left. It was about knowing when to open your hands, about choosing what was right over what was easy, about trusting that the bond you built would survive even the hardest goodbye. Pepper was never meant to stay. She was meant to be saved. And then, when the time came, she was meant to be free.